United States. Welcome, everybody. Following this presentation, there will be a moderated question and answer period, and we encourage you to submit questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. However, please hold off on submitting your questions until after the initial presentation is finished, as your questions may be addressed during that time. If you're having technical difficulties, please use the Q&A button and ask one of our staff, and one of our staff will be there to assist you. As I mentioned a moment ago, my name is Fatma Al-Haq. During the day, I work as a senior consultant for the Ontario Health Toronto region. However, my true passion is to be everyone's personal life cheerleader. I believe in the power of individuals to feel collective change and want to help everyone live their life of possibilities as a career and life coach. I've been very lucky to be on U of T Mississauga's alumni board of directors since 2017, which has been an invaluable experience, and I highly recommend it. And during my spare time, I also sit on a few other not-for-profit boards, and I'm always looking forward to other community projects that I can volunteer with. Today, I'm very delighted to introduce our presenter, Associate Professor in the Canada Research Chair in Translational Pain Research, Loren Martin. Hi, Loren. Welcome. Professor Martin received his PhD from the Institute of Medical Science at the University of Toronto in 2009, where he studied the memory impairing properties of general anesthetics. He continued his training at McGill University as a postdoctoral fellow, where he broadened his research to examine the influence of social interactions and memory on pain perceptions. Professor Martin then joined the faculty at the University of Toronto, where his lab research continues to explore the brain changes and neural connections involved in pain perception and modulation. Today, Professor Martin will be walking us through our brains on pain, illuminating why the experienced pain differs from individual to individual, and discussing the staggering reality of the failure in developing new pain drugs. What a very timely topic. So thank you so much for being with us today, Professor Martin. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you for that introduction. Just going to share my screen. Okay, so thank you. First, I'd like to say thanks to everyone for attending. It's my pleasure to be here today with you all to tell you a little bit about what my lab studies. And in a nutshell, we're really interested in pain modulation and the different scenarios that give rise to altered pain perception. And we study this pain modulation as a way to understand persistent pain and why pain may outlast injury. And so, as you will see, there's a lot to consider when studying pain. And we are really making just a small contribution to the many people suffering with persistent pain, which in Canada ends up being about 1 in 5 or 20% of the population. And so to begin with, I'm just going to highlight the issue and give you a bit of context about chronic pain and where it sort of falls in the within the health landscape. And so I've thrown up a couple of pressing health issues. And when you think of these health issues worldwide, I want you to think of the burden of some of these what can be considered pretty devastating diseases. And, so think of cancer and diabetes, depression, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, heart disease, Alzheimer's, and malaria. And I want you to think about it worldwide and in terms of burden. And by burden, I really mean in terms of disability, and as I will touch upon, financial burden. And so there's a cost associated with all of these diseases. And when you consider the burden of these diseases that I've listed, depression ranks as number 2, which in and of itself is actually quite remarkable. It should probably feed our policymakers as far as decisions are concerned. Pulmonary disease, problems breathing, ranks as number 5, diabetes, number 9. We have dementias, 24, and malaria. And when I think worldwide, I think malaria, and I think it should be quite a prevalent and burdensome disease, but it ranks at number 41. And so where does chronic pain fit into into this. And if you were to rank chronic pain, how would, and just have a little think about it, how would you rank chronic pain within these, against these different health issues? And so for chronic pain, there's not just one type of pain. There can be different subgroups and ways you can divide and parse apart what is considered chronic pain. And they all have their nuances and their discrete mechanisms and causes. But just for the purposes of this exercise, I've divided chronic pain into some of the more prevalent ones. So chronic back pain, chronic neck pain, which is becoming quite a problem with everyone working from home and probably spending more time than we ought to in front of a computer, hunched over. Migraine and headache also end up being quite prevalent. And if you were to slot them on this list, chronic back pain, in terms of burden, ranks as number 1. Chronic neck pain ranks as number 4. Migraine and headache rank at number 8. And osteoarthritis would rank at about number 11. And osteoarthritis brings burden in other ways, in terms of disability and loss of function, but pain ends up being the primary limiter there. And so these are subgroups of chronic pain, and they rank among, I've listed 4 here, and they rank, and 4 of them rank within the top 11 worldwide. And so in terms of how this impacts us, and so there's burden in terms of burden on the individual, in terms of limiting function, disability, not to mention reduced quality of life, but there's also a financial burden, a financial price tag associated with this. And if you just compare chronic pain with some of these other diseases, so diabetes and cardiovascular disease, the financial burden of chronic pain ends up being 2 or 3-fold higher. And financial burden can be measured in terms of lost productivity at work. And so paid sick days, it can be in terms of medical expenses for treating chronic pain, repeated doctor's visits, and so on and so forth, right? But many people will see the burden of chronic pain as the burden of people pretending to have chronic pain. And over the next 30 minutes or so, I want to convince you that that's false, that that's a false concept. And I want to do so by highlighting a few points about pain. And I'm going to start at the very sort of fundamental level by telling you that pain is our most protective device, right? From an evolutionary perspective, pain is intended to promote survival. And so if you think about, when you encounter something that is potentially painful or potentially dangerous, right, we have activation of specific receptors within our skin, our muscle, our joints, and these are called nociceptors. And the detection of that is nociception. And so we have nociceptive input that will and can and has the potential to trigger pain. And then what that causes an organism to do is to take appropriate action to either avoid that stimulus or to withdraw. And so think of if you touch something that's really hot. You touch something that's really hot, your initial instinct, and it's really a reflex, is to withdraw your hand. But that's a very simple model of pain. And when you think about it from an evolutionary perspective and an adaptive point of view, it's actually not quite adaptive, because in this scenario, the organism is always reacting. The organism is always reacting. There's damage, there's danger, and you are reacting to that potentially damaging and dangerous situation. And so when we encounter some of these, and what would be more adaptive would be to have a built-in system for prediction, and whether or not you would be able to predict if something is going to be painful. And so when we have this nociceptive input and we have danger cues that are signaling pain, we also are exposed to other stimuli within the environment. So think of back pain. If you have back pain or you injure your back, and you move in a certain way and it hurts. Normally, if you hadn't not suffered an injury, that movement would not be painful. But now, because you have an injury, that movement becomes quite painful. And so after enough time, that movement comes to signal pain, even after an injury has healed. And so what was once a normal neutral stimulus, and so that could be a movement, that could be a touch, now comes to signal pain. It actually predicts pain on a certain level. And so that neutral stimuli now signals danger. It signals danger, which can be equated with pain, but it's more complex than that. It is more complex than that. And we also have other information at our disposal, and a lot of information that may signal potential threat or may cause us to become fearful of a particular environment. And this could be something as simple as social observation, right? You watch another person or animal in pain, and you come to learn through social learning that whatever that animal has been engaged in or was exposed to is painful. And so we have all of this information at our disposal, which is constantly and consistently bombarding our brain. And on some respect, we are learning pain. And so with chronic pain, and while this pain system is meant to protect us, with chronic pain, the protection system just doesn't turn off. It becomes overprotective. And so just to highlight some of this threat information that I was mentioning, is that can come in the form of verbal information. If I tell you something is going to be painful, even though you have no prior experience with that particular stimuli, you may perceive it as more painful than it normally would or should be. Conditioning cues, and so that can be a particular movement with repeated pairings can come to signal pain. And as I already alluded to, it can be also social information. And so watching a loved one in pain and go through pain, and from a clinical perspective, like if you think of a parent with chronic pain, their children are watching and viewing this behavior as they are growing up. And the children of parents with chronic pain actually become more susceptible themselves to developing pain conditions later in life. And so all of this signals increased threat, which can amplify pain information, right? And all of that, and I'm not going to get into a lot of the specifics of brain processing per se, but all of that is processed by the brain, and the brain is taking all this information in and deciding whether or not that information is potentially life-threatening. And if it is, the sensation will be and can be amplified. And so we've in my lab, just because my memory, my background is in learning and memory, I became really interested in looking at our memory for pain. And we've done a few rather simple experiments where we would bring volunteers into the lab and we would measure their thermal heat pain thresholds. And so we place a heat probe on their forearm, and they would rate how painful that was on a scale of 0 to 100. And we would do that, and we would know how each person perceived that thermal sensation. And then we placed a blood pressure cuff on their bicep, and we pumped it up very, very tightly. And so what that does is it constricts blood flow, and we left it on there for quite some time, for about 20 minutes. And we did that because we wanted to give our volunteers a memorable pain experience in a particular environment. And the next day, we had the same volunteers come back, and they were either tested for their thermal pain thresholds in the same context or a completely different context. And what we found was that when males return to the pain-associated context, where we place that blood pressure cuff on their bicep, they now reported the same thermal stimulus as more painful, and it was also more unpleasant. What was really interesting with this study is that there was a really big sex difference where males responded like that, but females did not become sensitized to the thermal stimulus even after returning to that pain-associated context. And so we thought about this from sort of an adaptive perspective. And what we came up with and what we've been arguing is that males traditionally have that hunter role, that warrior role. And so it may be more adaptive for a male to remember where they've encountered a potentially painful stimulus and have amplified danger cues. But for a female, that's not necessarily the case. And females, it actually may be more adaptive to not remember the pain of something like childbirth. And so, we've been thinking about it from, why would we have this, this inherent sex difference where we would have pain sensitization in males, but not females when re-encountering environments that have been associated with painful experiences. Just to give you another example about how our environment changes our pain is that, if you have volunteers come into the lab and you take a very cold metal probe and you touch the top portion of the hand and you ask them how much it hurts, they will rate it on a scale of 0 to 10. But if you do that and you either show them a red light or a blue light, what you find is that they will rate the exact same stimulus as more painful in the presence of a red light. And why is that? Well, throughout our lives, we've come to associate red with things like danger, things like fire. And so, the argument also is that, the brain is perceiving red as a danger cue. And by doing so, it's amplifying pain signals. And conversely, blue has typically been associated with calm, and so it doesn't have that gravitas that red would have. But it's not only pain amplification. This becomes really interesting. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but it's so interesting that I wanted to touch upon it. Is that the color also matters for the medication that we take. And so, if I give you a red pill or a blue pill, depending on what I want to treat you for, the color of the medications we take will have different effects. And so if I want to give you a stimulant, I should make my medication red because it works better. But if I want to give you a sleeping pill, I would be better off to color my medication blue. Pain pills, for instance, work better when they are white. And in terms of pain, I could talk about this for quite some time, but other things associated with our perception of the medication also has a really big impact on whether or not and how well it will work. And so more expensive medication works better, not necessarily because it is better, just because we have that perception that if I'm paying more, it better work. It should work better. Also, if you were to compare, Advil and Life brand, ibuprofen, Advil works better, and a lot of it is more expensive, but also the marketing associated with it, and it is a name brand as opposed to, a no-name type of medication. And so I'm going to move on, and I want to highlight a second point here that I think is really important, especially in terms of understanding chronic pain conditions, is that the amount of pain you experience does not necessarily relate to the amount of tissue damage that you have sustained. In fact, for chronic pain patients, most patients will have at some point in their lives suffered an injury, but tissues heal. Yet the pain outlives the tissue healing. And so why is that? And there are many explanations for that, and we can get into that during the Q&A. But I want to leave you with a very brief example that we've all probably encountered in our lives, and I want to try to explain this with a bruise. And so a bruise is a very clear and objective sign of tissue damage, and I think we'd all probably agree on that. Yet most of us have found a bruise, and we have no idea how we got that bruise. A lot of times we say, oh, I woke up with a bruise. I must have got it when I was sleeping, or something of that nature. But when you think about it, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't know who these people are, keep on bruising themselves when they're sleeping. But a more reasonable explanation is that sometimes tissue damage to our tissue doesn't give us any pain. And altered cognitive states and can have a really big impact on that. And so being rushed, if we're stressed, if we have divided attention, that can all alter pain perception. And sometimes the brain doesn't consider tissue damage to be a threat or important for survival. If this is the case, the brain has no reason to amplify pain signals, and sometimes it's not important. It does not pay attention to the tissue damage. And so pain is not only related to tissue damage, just like bruises are not always related to pain. Third point that I'd like to make is that the amount of pain is influenced by who else is around us. And so if you've ever taken blood or had blood taken, you'll see that this is quite painful, or can be quite painful, partly in this image because the needle is going in the wrong direction, and partly because it also appears to be going into this gentleman's arm bone. But if I were to tell you that the degree of pain experienced during a scenario similar to this matters whether or not this nurse is a man or a woman, I don't know whether or not and how many of you would believe me. And so I'm just going to put up some data here. And if you are a man, and so the male subjects, and so if you're a man and you're having blood taken, or you're being exposed to a painful stimulus, you will report the same painful stimulus as less painful if a female is present or doing the procedure. If you are a female and a male is performing the procedure or present, you will actually report the same painful stimulus as more painful. And this can be, and probably is, related to our societal and gender roles. Just because males may want to appear more macho in front of females, and so there's an active suppression of pain, whereas females may need to have and be portrayed in a different light in front of males, and do report more pain, even though the stimulus in both scenarios ends up being exactly the same. And so we've done in my lab quite a bit of work on this, just because I find it really, really fascinating who within our environment matters for pain perception. And so in my lab, we study and we run experiments with people, but we also run a lot of experiments with animals and with mice. And so if we take two mice and we put them in the same physical environment, and we subject them to a pain stimulus, their pain becomes amplified. And when you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense, because if and especially for social groups, if a member of your social group is in pain, it can be for any number of reasons, but pain doesn't only warn the individual about danger, it also warns others within the environment about danger. And so just that mere act of observation can sensitize your own pain system. But what's really interesting, and and I say this is really important for social groups, is that there's an in-group, out-group sort of distinction to be made, where this pain amplification is present in familiar individuals. And so if you are within the same social group, your pain can become more sensitized when you observe another in pain. But strangers, they don't seem to have this same type of pain sensitization, pain amplification. And we've also done the same thing with people, is that if you bring friends into the lab and you give them a pain experience, and so in an experiment like this, we use a test called the cold pressor test, where it's very, very cold bucket of water. We have people place their hand in the cold bucket of water, and we have them rate it either in the presence of a friend or by themselves. They will rate the pain as more intense when they're in the presence of a friend. But if they are with a stranger, it doesn't seem to matter. And then, we've also done some work, not only within the, within species, but also sort of this cross-species pain sensitization or pain suppression, as you'll quickly see here. And so back in 2014, we published a paper where we showed that the gender of an experimenter influences rodent pain responses. And so you can see here in this graph that the pain response of a mouse, this was an inflammatory pain stimulus. The pain response of a mouse ends up being at a certain level. If we have an experimenter in the room, not touching the mouse, just in the room, that pain response is suppressed. It's much, much lower. But it's only much lower if the experimenter is a male. And so the thing to understand with mice is that they are prey species, and there is no larger predator for a mouse than a huge experimenter, and always reaching into their cages and these sort of things. And so it's not that, and as a prey species, right, it's not adaptive for them to show pain in front of a potential predator. But in this instance, it's actually more adaptive for them to suppress their pain, because if they are displaying pain in front of a predator, they become easier prey and are more susceptible to predation. And so when we published this, and we showed that, it was primarily the males that had this effect, because males, men, secrete something from their armpits that signals to the mice that there is a potential predator. And so when we published this, there was a number of news articles on this finding. Scientists' gender can skew research results. Lab mice get stressed out from men. Male researchers stress out rodents. Lab mouse test results depend on science genders. We have ways around this. Probably my favorite headline was this one: rodents repulsed by reeking male researchers. Okay. And so moving on, another point that I'd like to make is that we can't ignore the biological differences. And so I've talked about environment and a little bit about social aspects that can modulate pain perception, but there's also underlying biology, and we can't ignore that. And so one of the easiest low-hanging fruit, I guess you could say, would be to look at whether or not there are sex differences in pain sensitivity. And I get that question quite a bit. And contrary to popular belief, females, women, actually end up being more sensitive, right? And so this cartoon is perpetuating the myth that, that females have a higher pain threshold and intolerance, but it actually just is not the case. And so I'm going to show you a few graphs here. This was sort of a meta-analysis in which it looked at a number of different studies, and the pink bars highlight females being more sensitive than males. And so for pain threshold and pain tolerance, you can see that females, the number of studies reporting females more sensitive than males is quite a bit higher. The different types of pain, so cold pain, females are more sensitive. Electric pain, females more sensitive. Heat pain, females more sensitive. Ischemic pain, and so that would be something like blood pressure cuff, females more sensitive. Pressure pain, and even muscle pain. The other low-hanging fruit would be just looking at whether or not pain is inheritable. And one way to do that would be to look at identical twins, and this has been done in a number of studies. And so I'm just going to summarize a few findings here and quickly say that it doesn't seem like pain conditions, and so the susceptibility to developing chronic pain conditions, or even the sensitivity to different types of pain manipulation, tend to be highly heritable. And so, at the top graph is really highlighting the different types of chronic pain conditions. And as you can see, probably the average ends up being about 40% heritability across a number of different chronic pain conditions, some being more heritable and some being less. For the different types of pain, and so these are really laboratory tests, again, it ends up being about 40% on average heritability. And so if, variability in any pain trait is about 40%, there's a lot of room for other factors to control and modulate and contribute to someone's pain sensitivity. And so you probably heard a lot about, gene-environment interactions, and that ends up being a really big factor. What's in our environment and the cues in which our brain is processing and taking in and digesting all of this different type of information. You can do the similar types of studies in mouse strains, and so for mouse strains, we have a variety of different mouse strains, and it's essentially like looking at genetic clones of one another. And so if you're looking at a genetic clone like you would in an identical twin, you would assume that you would have a very high degree of heritability for different types of pain manipulation, but that's actually not the case. With some pain tests, there is more genetic inheritance, so to speak. But with a lot of them, there's a lot of variability even within our mouse subjects. And so, again, there's a lot to consider that is not being accounted for by pure biology. And so I want to touch upon this by just giving you a really cool, what I think is a really cool example, and that would be redheads. And so redheads are, make up maybe 1% to 2% of the population, and the red phenotype that in fair skin is caused by a mutation in a gene called melanocortin receptor 1, which appears at the tip of chromosome 16. And I'm giving you this example because they have wild, sort of pain responses, but it's also a phenotype that's easily identifiable, right? And so there's no genotyping necessary. If you are a natural redhead, you have this mutation. And so redheads have increased heat and cold pain sensitivity, but they have decreased electric pain sensitivity. If you consider other aspects that might be involved in sort of pain modulation, redheads actually they're more resistant to anesthesia. And so they require 20% more anesthesia, but they're more sensitive to opioid painkillers. But the good news is that they are, and this is a recent study, they are less susceptible to developing chronic pain. And so we've been, not only looking at brain mechanisms, although that's mostly what we do study, but we have been looking at some genetic mutations. And so back in 2017, we published a paper showing that female patients, if they have mutations in two genes, a gene called EGFR and a gene called EREG, they become more susceptible to developing a chronic facial pain condition. And so what we did is we used mice, and we manipulated these genes and the proteins made from these genes, and we found that if we inhibit this one gene, EGFR, it actually looks like it's a pretty good pain therapy. If we activate EGFR with something called epiregulin, then there's more pain in our mice. And what we did is, and so when we consider the biology, right, there's obviously brain biology and brain structures and processing that happens, but there's also sensory pathways from the skin to the spinal cord and then up in the brain. And with pain researchers, a lot of times what they are studying is the mechanisms that are happening in and around the spinal cord. And so what we found was that these genes were sensitizing proteins that were important for pain processing in some of the sensory pathways, not the brain, but some of the sensory pathways in sensory neurons down near the spinal cord. And just sticking with the whole evolutionary theme, and so we found this mutation initially in people, and then we moved to mice, and we showed these various manipulations would actually modulate pain sensitivity. But then we also used fruit fly, and we measured and we deleted the genes in fruit flies, and we found that they also seemed to, when we did that, it also seemed to mimic a lot of our other results, where if we deleted EGFR, for instance, the fruit flies were less sensitive to different types of pain, right? And so this is a gene where there's a lot of evolutionary conservation. So I want to have, I guess, more or less talk about what I think is related, and it is related to sex differences, but it's also the prevalence of chronic pain and the female specific preponderance of chronic pain conditions. And so if you look at the prevalence of different pain conditions and you divide it by sex, there's increased prevalence of chronic pain conditions in females, right? This can be due to a lot of factors, right? It could be due to a reporting issue where males are not, seeking treatment for different pain conditions, but it can also be related to, well, there's a sex difference, and females may be inherently more susceptible to developing chronic pain. And so if you look at back pain, migraine, musculoskeletal, neuropathic, oral osteoarthritis, and widespread or fibromyalgia, the prevalence, and so if the bar is in the pink zone, the prevalence is increased and shifted towards higher in females. And so you can see all except maybe one study for back pain all points towards higher prevalence in female patients. And so how can we change our relationship with pain? And so, there are a few different characteristics of people when in terms of considering pain. And one of the things that pain does is it makes us reduce function. And so a very prominent type of a personality associated with pain is that as soon as pain starts, we reduce activity. And so these are the people that are typically scared of pain, right? And so, they increase their activity. Oh, pain starts, and then they quickly reduce, and then they try again. But over time, what happens is that the activity follows a downward trajectory. There's another type of personality where there is, it's called the boom buster, where there's a lot of activity. They break through, they boom through the pain threshold, right? And so they sort of grin and bear it. But then the pain becomes unbearable and the activity drops, right? And so they do this and they go through this cyclical pattern. But again, what happens is that over time, the activity level continues to drop because you can only do this for so long. The type of people that are typically the boom busters include perfectionists, high achievers, stoic people, even high energy people. But both strategies are wrong. You shouldn't, you may identify with one or the other, but you shouldn't. So what can we do and how can we change our relationship? One of the biggest things that we can do is we can educate patients on their pain conditions. We can educate them on solutions towards pain treatment. And so I've just put this up. I'm not going to go through this, but these are, this is a sort of a pamphlet that you would give to a primary care physician, for instance, on how you should talk to your patients about pain, what you should educate them on. And as a patient, you should educate yourself. And there are a lot of, and I know a lot of patients are educating themselves on their own conditions, and you should be your own advocate, because you are your own best advocate for in terms of your healthcare, right? But going back to the, sort of the beginning, learning about pain actually reduces the threat value of pain, right? If you understand that, well, yeah, okay, there's pain, but if I move in this direction, even though it hurts, it's not causing any more damage, it becomes less of a threat. And so if you can learn about pain, you reduce the threat value, which actually has a big impact on improving pain outcomes. And so I'm just going to quickly go through some take-home points. Chronic pain is the most burdensome health issue in terms of disability, medical, and societal costs. Pain is our most protective device and changed by our experience and social context. Biology contributes to pain, but it's far from the whole story, right? Like, we have to get away from thinking about pain as purely a biological phenomenon. And drug treatment in combination with behavioral therapy may be our best tool for managing chronic pain. Now, the one thing that I didn't talk about is the failure of pain drugs, but if anyone has any questions on that, I'd be happy to give you my view on that. And so just to acknowledge the wonderful people in my lab and also the funding sources, and I'd be happy to answer any questions with the time we have left. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Loren, for sharing your insights and experience with us. I mean, I work in the healthcare industry, and you challenged so many of my perceptions about the cost and the management of chronic pain. We've got quite a few questions. I have a lot of questions, but we have quite a few questions, so I'm just going to jump right in. So you've highlighted quite a bit about the different experiences men and women have related to pain sensitivity, just the experiences. When I go down the grocery aisle, I don't see the different medication associated with males and females. So does medicine also need to address their pains in different ways?
So, yes, I believe so. Like, one of the big things in pain medicine that is trying to revolutionize the field is personalized pain medicine, right? And so that personalized care, part of it is considering the sex and the gender of the individual. And I didn't talk about this when I talked about the sex differences, but back in 2015, I was involved in a study showing that males and females, and mind you, this is mice, and so we're looking at the mechanism of chronic pain, but they actually have different cells involved in maintaining chronic pain. And so, so there can be different drug treatments for males versus females that are actually targeting different subtypes of cells that that should be considered. Now, we don't know if that's true for people, but it's probably on the horizon. It's as something that will be tested within the next few years.
Very, very interesting. I'd like to see how that lands with society as a whole, given our current conversations about gender. Great. Can you talk a bit about pain management techniques other than medication? So I know you shared that brochure, but does the mind and mental training, such as meditation, have a part to play in pain management, especially chronic pain? It's also related to the quality of life as well, if medication isn't working.
Yes. So I think in terms of mindfulness and meditation and some of the alternative therapies, like I'm a big believer in cognitive behavioral therapy, for instance. I think cognitive behavioral therapy has a really big role to play in sort of, because our philosophy, at least my philosophy, is that chronic pain to a certain extent is learning pain. And so cognitive behavioral therapy will help us to potentially unlearn the pain. But in terms of mindfulness and meditation, they do work for a subset of people, right? But this and this is the point that I want to make, though. If you find something that works, no matter if I'm telling you that it's an alternative medicine, it's placebo effect, if it works, do it. Right? Because a lot of people will believe that mindfulness and meditation and these type of things, most of it is a placebo effect. But the placebo effect, and I didn't really get into the power of the placebo effect, but it can be pretty powerful. And so if you find something that works, you should do it.
Yeah, definitely, especially when you shared those studies where it says like it has to do with who you're around, society, like so much of it is actually perception. Or I shouldn't say actually, but so another question we have is how is pain experienced differently with those with sensory processing disorder or autism?
Oh yeah, so we just published a study actually showing that mice with autism, and so autism has been linked to a variety of different genes, and so in mice you can delete and you can change the genetic you can change the genes of mice and they will display autism-like behaviors. And so we've published a study showing that that mice that have autistic phenotypes actually are more sensitive to particular types of pain. For instance, in people with autism, there's a lot of visceral type of pain. Right. And so there is and when you think of autism, it's in terms of like, it is a sensory processing disorder, and that's what pain is. Right. And so depending on the specific genetic mutations that have been linked to causing those social impairments and that sensory processing, yeah, for sure, pain can be altered. And there are specific phenotypic profiles, most notably probably the visceral pain, so a lot of tummy aches and things like that.
That's very interesting because there's been an increase in not like diagnosis for autism and developmental delays. So it'd just be interesting to see how pain medication relates to that later on as we move along. So we have a question from Morgan. I'm interested in your view on the use of neuromodulating drugs. Should they be used early or only once chronic pain has been established as a diagnosis? Excellent question, Morgan. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I for what you should target pain mechanisms and seek pain treatment as early as possible, right? Because if you think about it from a learning perspective, right? If you are, even if you are dampening pain signals early on, so say you just injure your back and you're like, oh, I will just, I'll just forget about it. But if you keep on twisting and turning in specific ways that's eliciting and causing you pain, you're learning that pain. But if you can dampen down those signals and you can seek appropriate treatment, right, you don't give your brain that opportunity to really learn how all of those neutral stimuli are now associated with danger cues. And so I'm a really big advocate of, yeah, if you injure yourself and you have it within at your means and your disposal to seek treatment, you should seek it early and often. And again, you should be your own best advocate, because you know your body better than the primary care physician who you're making an appointment with and you're going to see.
That's great. Thank you so much, Loren. We have another question from Nancy. Can you please talk a little bit of how results from your research are being applied in clinical practice, and how, and can you share where we can get a copy of the pamphlet? That was a great pamphlet, actually.
Yeah, I can look for the pamphlet, and then if anyone's interested, I can have the organizers possibly disseminate the pamphlet, because it is a great pamphlet. But a lot of what my research is aiming to do, and I didn't really talk about this, but there's a really big stigma associated with chronic pain. Right? There's a really big stigma associated with chronic pain. And so, whenever I speak with healthcare providers or clinicians, a lot of the things that they don't consider are, how our environment influences pain and potentially pain treatment, how who we are with can influence pain and pain treatment. And so what we are doing is we are reducing, at least on some level, the stigma. Some of the some of the studies that I didn't talk about, like we've been looking at pain and depression, for instance, and because associated with chronic pain, there's a lot of comorbidities, and so there are a lot of other underlying health issues associated with that. And so we are looking at developing at the mechanisms first that contribute to some of these underlying comorbidities, but how we could possibly target some of these mechanisms for better treatment.
You're challenging all my perceptions of chronic pain. This is great. Thank you for that response. We have another great question, and I'm sure this is going to take some time. Can you expand? Thanks, Marilyn, for the question. Can you expand on the failure of pain medication?
Yeah. So I give an entire talk on the failure of pain medication. And so part of the problem is, and so, I talked about the prevalence of chronic pain in females, right? And so if we take that at face value, that females make up the majority of the population that we aim to treat, most pain research starts using the rat, but it starts by using male rats, for instance, right? And so if there are inherent sex differences in the way the sexes are processing and reacting to pain, well, first, we're studying the wrong sex. The other thing I might have it here. Oh, no, my screen is not being shared. So the other thing is that what bothers chronic pain patients is spontaneous pain. And so you're just sitting there and it hurts, you hurt without moving. But for mouse researchers or rat researchers, for instance, what they're studying are reflexes. They're not studying, because you can't ask a mouse if it hurts, if it's just in pain. And so we have these measures that we use that end up being mostly reflexive in nature. And by doing so, we're also studying the wrong symptom. Right. And so, there's, and like I said, like I go on and I have an entire talk on issues within the field. But those are probably two of the biggest issues, is that we're studying the wrong sex and we're studying the wrong symptoms. When we use mice and rats to develop new drugs, we're only studying the biology. And as I just went through, there's the psychological aspect and the social aspect, which is never considered.
Yeah, wow. Thanks, thanks, Loren, because there is a huge movement right now about females and pain, and not having that feedback from the clinical practice about the level of pain that females are actually in. So we have another great question from Miriam and Damas. Do you know of any proven benefits to using psilocybin, LSD, DMT to rewrite pain pathways, or is this a myth?
It's a new area of research. And so it is a new area of research that is being looked at. And so I don't know anything about like psilocybin or LSD. I mean, I know what they are, and I know that they are being looked at in terms of pain and chronic pain management. But what I will say, and what has been looked at for quite some time, is a drug called ketamine. And ketamine is a dissociative anesthetic, which, like a lot of the raver kids were taking. I know like back in the 90s, and I don't know, maybe they still do. I don't know. But what it does is it basically gives you an out-of-body experience. But ketamine is, it also has a mechanism in which it inhibits a receptor called NMDA that's important for learning and memory. And so ketamine has some proven benefits in terms of inhibiting these receptors and treating some pretty devastating pain conditions. And so there's a pain condition called complex regional pain syndrome, which is excruciating, where patients can't even wear clothing on the affected body part. But there have been some experimental treatments, like mostly in Europe, not really in North America, where patients have been put into a ketamine-induced coma, and when they wake up, they forget a lot of things. Eventually, they regain their memory. But one of the sort of the side effects of that is that the pain has improved greatly. So it's a really interesting area of research, and one that is emerging, and probably within the next few years, you will see more on psilocybin and LSD in terms of rewriting and reorganizing pain pathways.
Great. We have time for one last question. So can you discuss the linkage between PTSD, CPTSD, and chronic pain? And how can we reduce the amount of runaround and misdiagnosis for chronic pain patients suffering from PTSD and CPTSD?
Yeah, so that's like that's a really great question. And one of the things that we are studying in mice in our lab is animal models of PTSD. And looking at whether or not a mouse has been exposed to something that causes extreme fear, how that impacts pain perception and pain sensitivity. And when combined with a traumatic experience, pain outlasts the resolution of an injury. In patients, I know a lot of pain patients, a few pain patients who they've been in car accidents, for instance, and every time they walk by the scene of that accident, their pain flares up, right? Because again, the environment has contributed to that. It increases fear, and that's the thing with PTSD, is that there's an underlying fear. And they didn't talk about this, but there's a really big linkage between fear and pain, and how they both sort of control and regulate one another. What I will say though, and with PTSD patients, there are flashbacks that they have, like, so think of like war veterans and things like that. And when they have flashbacks, their pain sensitivity is actually increased. But what I will say in terms of how you can avoid the runaround is that you have to educate yourself on pain conditions, and you have to be your best advocate, right? Like if you are in pain and and your doctor's prescribing a treatment and you've been on that treatment and it's not working, right? You shouldn't leave the doctor's office until you're satisfied with the treatment. And the only way you are going to be able to sort of have the wherewithal to talk to your doctor about that is by educating yourself on your condition and potential treatments. And now I don't want to say that everyone should be, a Google MD, because that's really not what I'm saying. But what I do think is that, like this is a good start. You need to talk to people who do the research, who are in the field, to advise you on particular and different avenues. And I will also offer a disclaimer that I am not an MD, right? I am a researcher. I am a PhD, but I'm always happy to provide my perspective. And I know a lot of people within the pain field are also happy to provide their perspective. It's a very tight-knit community.
Thank you so much, Loren, for that. This is very insightful. So on behalf of University of Toronto, Mississauga, I'd like to thank you, Professor Martin, for your presentation and responses to the questions from our alumni audience. If there are any key takeaways, I think it's educate yourself and then be your best advocate. Loren, thank you so much again for doing the presentation.
Yeah, well, thank you, Fatima, for moderating. I enjoyed it. Thank you to the organizers, the Alumni Association, and to all of you for taking the time and logging on this afternoon.
Thanks, Loren.
Okay.
So to our audience, thank you so much for your interest and time. We received a lot of questions today, and we apologize if we weren't able to get to yours. When this webinar ends, you will have the option to take a post-event survey, and we do hope you'll take a couple of minutes to complete it, as your feedback is so helpful in planning future events. Everyone who registered for today's event will also receive a link to the recording in their inboxes in the next few days, I believe. And if you enjoyed today's webinar, please be sure to check out the upcoming event listing and more on the UTM alumni webpage. Thank you.